When I sat down for the first class in my doctoral program, I was so nervous, kind of like I am right now. There are 11 new students in the PhD program at Princeton University, and I was intimidated by their brain power, but I was also eager to prove that I belonged. Now, that first class was with a man named Danny Kahneman, who would one day win the Nobel Prize in economics. About an hour into that class, I saw an opportunity to say something insightful, and I eagerly raised my hand. I still remember, 30 years later, the exact transformation in Danny's demeanor. He crossed his arms, he shook his head, he strunk of his face, and he said, "That's not right at all." Now, Danny and the class moved on, but I didn't. I was frozen in place. Those words, "That's not right at all," reverberated inside of me. It would take me weeks to speak in Danny's class, let alone any class. However, about halfway through the semester, Danny passed me in the hallway and nonchalantly said, "Hey, Adam, I love reading your reflection papers. You're a great writer." I was filled with so much joy and elation, I literally skipped down the hallway. Now, these two very different Danny Kahneman stories actually represent the exact same phenomena, what I call the leader amplification effect. When you are in a position of leadership, all of your expressions, all of your words, good and bad, get amplified. When you have power, when you have authority, your behavior matters more. Now, Danny's comments were inconsequential to him, but they were deeply impactful to me. His dismissive comment felt like humiliating criticism, but his compliment felt like glorious praise. Now, these two Danny Kahneman stories also represent the two themes of this talk. The first is that the leader amplification effect is a really big deal. The second is that we can actually use that for good. We can use the leader amplification effect to inspire others and change the world. Here's another example of the leader amplification effect. Imagine getting this text from your friend, "I need to talk to you." Now, those words are a little ambiguous. It's unclear whether it's good news or bad news, or even involves you. So you might worry, but just a little bit. But now imagine those same 6 words came from your boss, right? Those words would literally scream off the page, ominous and portentous. Now, I came face to face with those 6 words and the leader amplification effect when I was a young assistant professor. Now, assistant professors have more power than doctoral students, but less power than tenured faculty members. Well, one morning about 9 a.m., the elevator doors opened, and I see Gail Berger, and I say, "Gail, I need to talk to you. Come by my office at 3 p.m. So I was a little surprised when Gail came in my office, and she was crouched in fear. And I was particularly perplexed because I just wanted to go over some research materials with her. But I was extremely befuddled with what she did next. She slammed her fist on the table and said, "Never do that to me again." And I said, "Oh my God, do what?" And she said, "Never tell me you need to meet with me without telling me why." Do you know how much work I got done the last 6 hours? 0. Is Adam mad at me? Is someone else mad at me? Am I going to lose a resource? Now, at first I thought Gail's neurotic. Turns out Gail is a little neurotic. But the very next day, the most powerful person in my department asked to meet with me, and I walked in the same fearful crouch. Here's a final example of the leader amplification effect. Plane is going from Denver to Montana. It drops 1,000 feet in 12 seconds. A baby flies out of its mother's arms and miraculously lands in a nearby seat unharmed. A flight attendant wasn't so lucky. She went up so hard she hit her head, was knocked unconscious, and did not regain consciousness for the rest of the flight. However, what happened next was remarkable. So what happened next was nothing. The pilots never said a word. My brother was on that flight, and he talked about how terrified he was by the silence, how he wondered if the plane had been injured or the pilots had been injured. He described that silence as deafening silence. Now, we get it, right? The pilots were dealing with the precipitous plummet and what they had to do about it. But when leaders are silent, followers fill the void with worst-case scenarios. But it's not all bad news. the leader amplification effect can be used for good. That's where he learned with Danny Kahneman when he caused my joy to amplify with his compliment. In fact, it can be even used to inspire people. On January 25th, 2006, my plane landed at midnight in Los Angeles, and I immediately knew something was up. Voicemail after voicemail carried tired and wearied voices telling me to call them no matter how late. When I called my twin brother back, he told me the tragic news. My dad had been hit by a car walking and killed. As you can imagine, I was devastated. I was a mess. The only saving grace is that my dad's only sibling lived in Los Angeles. When I arrived at her doorstep at 1 a.m., we embraced in sorrow and in comfort. And I plaintively said to her, "I can't believe I've lost my dad." And she said, "We have all lost the dad. I was his big sister, but he was my dad." Those words, "We have all lost a dad," stayed with me in the days that followed. And I kept wondering, why did they ring so true? And then it hit me. What my aunt was saying is my dad was a guy that helped her get through life. But it wasn't just my dad. So many people at his memorial service told me stories that echoed Danny Kahneman and the leader amplification effect. They talked about his occasional but sharp criticism that lingered with them to this day. But they also talked about his enormous passion and encouragement that continued to nourish them. Motivated by my dad's impact, I started asking people all over the world to think about someone that inspired them. I want you to do the same thing right now. Think about someone in your life that inspired you. They could be a relative like my dad, teacher like Danny Kahneman, a coach, a boss, a religious figure. Now I want you to think about what was that feeling of inspiration like? People use words like light and bright and warmth, and they describe it as a wellspring of hope and possibility. Now try to pinpoint the cause of that feeling. What was it about that person that inspired you? What was that exact characteristic or attribute? Now I want you to think about a different type of leader, someone who also changed you inside, but this time they infuriated you, right? They made your blood boil. They created a seething cauldron of rage and resentment. What was it about that person that infuriated you? Now, I've asked these questions of tens of thousands of people across the globe, and my research has led to 3 insights. First, the inspiring leader and the infuriating leader are mirror images of each other. They exist on an enduring continuum. Inspiring leaders see the big picture. Infuriating leaders are lost in the weeds. Inspiring leaders are courageous. Infuriating leaders are cowardly. Inspiring leaders are generous. Infuriating leaders are selfish. The second insight is that the inspiring and infuriating continuum is universal. Every single attribute used to describe an inspiring leader in one country is used in every country in the world. And third, I can take all of these thousands of examples and reduce them to a few core factors. Now, to reveal those factors, I can tell you about an amazing captain named Tammy Jo Schultz. She was captain of Southwest Flight 1380 as it took off from New York City down to Dallas, Texas. And partway through the flight, an engine exploded on the left side of the plane and tore a hole in the side of the plane. The plane started to descend. Tammy Jo gave her passengers a reassuring why. She said, "We are not going down. We are going to Philadelphia." Those simple words transformed the cabin from pure panic to possibility. Now, when she amazingly landed the plane with no more injuries, she was being evaluated by an EMT who said to her, "Hey, how did you get through security?" She was a little confused. He said, "How did your nerves of steel not set off the metal detectors? You're completely calm." Now, before Tammy Jo left that plane, she went row by row and checked in on each and every passenger to make sure they were okay. Unlike the pilots on my brother's flight, She understood her role as both protector, but also comforter. So Tammy Jo Schultz, the story reveals the three elements of an inspiring leader. They are visionary, they are an exemplar, and they are a great mentor. I call these the Venn diagram of inspiring leadership. And inspire others, we can do that through our words, through our actions, and through our interactions. Now, this example also shows us the leader amplification effect, right? Because of her position as captain and authority, her behavior mattered more. Let's go through each one of these factors. What does it mean to be visionary? Well, let me ask you a different question. Raise your hand if you have kids. So those of you who have kids know a simple fact. Your life gets worse when you have kids, right? You rarely sleep, you barely eat, you seldom shower, you never have sex. Your house is a mess, your body's a mess, your mind is a mess. And yet our species hasn't died off. Why? Well, if you ask new parents about their experience, they'll often say, my life has a newfound sense of purpose, a new sense of meaning. Now, this link between meaning and parenthood tells us something fundamental about human nature. Regardless of whether you have kids or not, we are biologically conditioned to crave meaning. Consider this quote from Nietzsche. People who have a why to live can bear almost any how. We crave a why, but not just any why. We crave an optimistic why, one full of hope and possibility, like the one Tammy Jo Schultz gave her passengers as they were descending. A few years ago, a soccer coach took his team to explore some caves in Thailand. When they went in, it was a sunny afternoon, and unknown to them, a sudden and monstrous storm was about to descend upon them. And that storm would produce so much water so quickly that it would flood the cave and it would trap them. And it would trap them for 10 days with no food, no water, and no way to crawl for help. How on earth did they survive? Their coach inspired them to survive. It started with his vision. He never used the words trapped or stuck. He knew that would only amplify their panic. Instead, every single day he said, I have a plan to keep you safe and to get you out. As one boy said, because Coach Eek said we had a way out, we worked every day on getting out. Inspiring leader is an exemplar of desired behavior. Let's look at these two photographs of two commanders leading their countries towards independence. The American hero George Washington and the Greek heroine Bouboulina. Now, they're very different on every possible dimension, right? Different genders, different countries, different centuries, different ages, but they were remarkably similar, right? Where's their boat? It's the lead boat. Where are they in that boat? They're in the front of the boat. What are they doing? They're standing up in that boat. They are taking on the most risk. Like Tammy Jo Schultz, they're calm and courageous in the face of adversity. Inspiring leaders are also authentically passionate. When you are passionate, when you genuinely feel passion, it transforms you. It transforms your eyes, transforms your mouth, your hands, your voice even. But it doesn't just transform you. It also transforms others because passion, like calmness and anxiety, is contagious. But the leader amplification effect makes it truly infectious. Your calmness becomes their calmness. Your anxiety becomes their anxiety. Your passion becomes their passion. Coach Eek understood that in this situation, his strength was their strength. Now, the situation would get to him. He would feel overwhelmed and he would need to cry. But he always did it privately because in this situation, he knew that his weakness would only amplify their panic. The final element of an inspiring leader is a great mentor. And to help you understand what it means to be a great mentor, I'm going to give you a physics problem. What happens when you put force and pressure on an object? What direction does it go in? Well, when you put force and pressure on an object, it goes in the direction of the object. This is my Dean D. McGlars putting force and pressure on this object, and there it goes. But let's change one word from this. When you put force and pressure on a person what direction they go in. Now my dean puts force and pressure on me, and I push back. And this tells us something really, really, really important about human nature. People aren't objects. If people are objects, leadership would be a physics problem. But because people aren't objects, leadership is a person problem. And to inspire people, we have to empower people. We also need to comfort them. Coach Eek understood this. In the cave, he would sing with his team to lift their mood. And he would help them experience their pathos, telling them, whoever needs to cry, let it out. He also led them in meditation. And that meditation not only calmed them down, actually allowed them to use the rapidly diminishing oxygen more efficiently. In fact, oxygen fell below life-sustaining levels, and they still survived for a few more days. My 3 insights about inspiring leadership: that inspiring and infuriating leaders exist in an enduring continuum made up of 3 universal factors, has a profound implication for each and every one of you. All of you have the potential to be inspiring. And because there are a systematic and universal set of attributes that make up an inspiring leader, they can be taught, they can be developed, and they can be nurtured. And remember the leader amplification effect. When you're in a position of leadership, all of these elements of being inspiring matter even more. So how can you be more inspiring more than time? Well, let's go back to my story about Gail, right? I said, Gail, I need to talk to you. What if instead I said, Gail, let's review our research materials? Notice that would have cost me nothing. They're both 13 words. So when you're in a position of authority, commit to giving people a why. Let's go back to Danny Kahneman's compliment of my writing. Now it calls my joy to expand. Look for ways to leverage the leader amplification effect. Complement those with less power for a job well done. And let's go back to my brother on that flight and his silent pilots after the fall versus Tammy Jo Schultz reassuring her passengers they're not going down, they're going to Philadelphia, right? Offer reassurance when you see panic rising in others. Each and every one of us in this room can be a Tammy Jo Schultz, a Coach Eek, or my dad. We can use the leader amplification effect for good. We can all be a more inspiring version of ourselves. So how do we do that? Well, it starts with reflection. Once a month, you should reflect on when you were inspiring, but also when you weren't inspiring. When weren't you seeing the big picture, offering meaning? When weren't you courageous or calm? When weren't you empowering or comforting others? Next, make a commitment, even a small one, to being a little bit more visionary, a better exemplar, a more supportive the next month. And if you can weave these periodic reflections and commitments into the daily fabric of your life, you will inspire others and transform the world.